I'm Shayla. I was a former competitive gymnast. I coach gymnastics now for 10 years, all ages. I was from like the little tots with the little diapers all the way to the optional team girls just before they go off to college. I've done adult gymnastic classes. I've done mobility and gymnastic clinics like this at CrossFit gyms and some other gyms. I was last coaching full-time in Hawaii, and then I went nomadic and started coaching online and trying to work more with gyms virtually like this. That's been my background, especially coaching online. I've really focused on the mobility side, because I really feel like having the mobility as your foundation is so vital to gaining all of the strength and everything else and branching out from there. So we'll start with the mobility piece and how I teach that, and then going into the handstand, it's a little bit tricky because you guys are obviously very advanced and you guys really know what you're doing. So I want to start from the basics, as if you don't know any handstands, we'll progress really quickly through the foundational stuff so you can, one, take it yourself and help others as well. All right. Okay. So mobility first. How I like to teach mobility is a 4-point method. One, joint mobilization, which is often done by a clinician, but there are some bands and different things we can use here. And then the soft tissue and input work, which we usually use with the foam rollers, massage balls, and then the active stretches and range isometric hold. And then the last, joint stabilization, because joint stabilization is often missed and can be a key factor for joints locking up or restricting motion if they just don't have the stability to be in those ranges of motion. First, I have the bands out here. We're gonna start with a super light band. You guys can take the heavier ones. You ladies, a little bit lighter. So I always like to warm up with getting some blood flow before we start into our mobility. And this is also a great handstand warm up and strengthening drill. So thumbs out, we're gonna windshield wiper it in, open up your chest, squeeze your shoulder blades together. So you're working your rhomboid major, up and back. You should feel your mid back fire here. So open, open, open your chest. So you should feel right in here. Nice. Pinch your shoulder blades together so you're firing here. Yes. Up and down, keep your palms facing each other. If you're doing this correctly, you should feel your upper back warming up. Pinch your shoulder blades. Nice. Nice, nice. Those are pretty thick, like the thicker booty bands. If you have ideally really light ones like this, so you can really focus on opening your chest and working that rhomboid major, because otherwise it's just your delts are taking over and you're not able to actually open up your chest.
We have a lot of booty bands here.
Yeah, I'm sure. We're gonna get into joint mobilization next. Ladies, lighter bands. You guys are gonna use the heavier, about shoulder height when you're sitting. And I always like to do this when seated, so your hip bones are locked in, because especially when people are standing, they really start to like to twist their spine and rotate. You want to keep your shoulders back, core engaged. We're going to work with some joint mobilization, pulling your femur back. The biggest thing is it wants to slip in onto your clavicle bone. The goal is to roll it back so it's actually sitting on the femur, and so it's pulling the shoulder joint back and in place. From there, just focus on keeping your core tight, straight, and stable, and then you're going to hunt for the end range of motion behind you, working it back, and fight for that end range of motion here. Really fighting for that end range of motion is really where we're getting the work with this band pulling back. Yeah, and then extend up, palm open. So we really hunt for this end range and lean against that band. Yep, just a tiny bit more. Yeah, you guys all got this. That's great. That's great. Just enough that you feel some tissue change. So not so much that you're having to twist through your spine, but enough that you feel your joint being pulled back and in place. Yeah, and so I also like to cross my feet, yeah, and then hold your ankle, and that helps stabilize. And then just think about lengthening through your spine, yep. And then really find this end range of motion. Nice. And then, oh yeah, that's really tight right there. Especially this way is not too bad for you. This is pretty good. Yeah, rotating forward, that's super tight right there. Once you do that way, just turn around. Now we're gonna pull the opposite direction. And again, make sure it's on your femur, pulling back, keeping this arm extended, hunting for that end range of motion. If you really wanna fight to pull back and increase that range. Extend your arm. Motion, you're stepping out, and then you're grabbing this PVC, behind you. You want to keep your arm extended out. And then one, you're going to passively pull with this hand and let your hand go back, so we get the passive stretch. And then the isometric stretch of trying to pull against the PVC as you let the band pull your femur back. Give yourself a little bit more room so your arm is really extended. Passively pull.
So I'm pulling with this arm?
Yeah, you're just creating tension with this arm. Yep. So not really focusing on the stretch here. And another thing, keep your shoulders square. And then the isometric hold of pulling back against the tension created by this hand. Nice. And tension on the band. This hand creates the tension. And then, there we go. Pull the PVC and passively stretch here. Then actively pull this hand back. Feel that here? Nice. Opening up the shoulder here, and then actively pulling it back. So you're toggling back and forth between the passive stretch and the active isometric stretch. Yeah, that's great. We're going to go into joint stabilization. Often, especially if we don't have the stabilization in our shoulders, they will lock up and create pain, and it's a lot of times lack of stability in that joint. And especially for handstands, if you are training them a lot, we spend so much time in full extension that our wrists get weak, and we actually need to strengthen in this straight stack position, and then strengthen our delts as well. Take a seat. Because again, I really like doing a lot of the shoulder work seated, so our hips are locked in and we have force to keep our core stabilized a little bit more so versus when you're standing, you can shift and use your body to move the kettlebell. So we'll go into the bottoms up kettlebell first, arms up. For some people, just here is going to be hard enough. Some people are going to have to start without the kettlebell. And then eventually the goal is to extend all the way out and open the chest. Now, especially I notice with a lot of guys who have a lot of mass, they are compensating with their chest and they're just rotating through their torso. So I said fix it for light as possible. So it's important that it's light enough that you can actually extend your shoulder all the way back and keep your arm extended. If you're here, you're still just compensating with your bicep. Full extension, get that arm all the way out, stand through the elbow. Keep your core in place, don't let it shift. I told you grab the light ones. This is just the beginning. Extend even a little bit more. You really want to be able to light up the back here. So open, yeah. Yeah, switch, that one's super heavy. Go to this one. The lighter kettlebell, then he's able to open up here. It's really about building that joint stabilization, working the end ranges of motion. So it needs to be light enough to actually work the end range. Otherwise, you're just sitting here compensating with your shoulders and delts and just rotating back and forth. Really fight to open and reach that hold and that end range. That's great. This is really good here. One more time. You're really finding that end range. That's really great. For this one, we're bringing same knee that the arm is extended. Now the important part is that you're fully extending through this shoulder before you start to rotate. This other hand, I want it out of the way. If it's here, it's going to stop you. It feels a little bit easier here because you can help stabilize yourself, but it's going to stop your rotation. And I want all of the work coming through your shoulder. Your foot is going to help. So as soon as you can, get that knee to the ground to help stabilize. And from here, keep pressing, protracting through the shoulder. And then you can slowly work your chest further. If you find that end range, you can extend your back leg and try to get your hips on the ground. The important thing is keep your eyes at the kettlebell. As soon as you take your eyes away, it gets harder to stabilize. This one can be a little bit dangerous because if you have a super heavy kettlebell and you look away, you can easily drop it on your face. Start light and gradually build up and rotate back and forth. You want to do both rotating and holding in this end range. And keep your eyes up at the kettlebell. Nice. Next one, we're getting more into the T-spine rotation and some hip mobility. So this one, I want your palms open. You can do this bottoms up if you really want to challenge yourself, but we're really focusing now on the T-spine rotation. So back knee is facing out. Now from here, you're gonna really press through your shoulder at all times, and your hips are gonna hinge back slightly as you reach for the ground. Keep your palm open and extend back up. To take it to the next level, hinge your hips further back and drop your elbow down. The trick is the hinge hip, because if you keep your hips here and you try to hinge back, you run out of space very quickly by hitting your leg. So you have to keep your hips and slowly extend back. And then you can inch closer and closer to the ground. And then reach this hand down. Yeah, there you go. And then take your hip, instead of this way, take it back. Yeah, and then drop your elbow down to the ground. And you can even do a heavier kettlebell, and then that will help lower you down a little bit more. Okay. And just keep thinking about hip rotation back. That's a bit. No further with your hips. Yes. So you're trying to go down with just your hip mobility. You have to really crank and work on that T-spine rotation. Next one, it's very similar, but we're going to the full windmill. The biggest thing people like to do is just go super wide, round through the back and reach down like this. I want you to keep your feet outside of hips width for sure, but not too wide. And I want you to think about extending through your lower back, keeping it as straight as possible as you twist. And we're bringing in our hamstring all the way into that T-spine rotation. The biggest thing is don't try to touch the ground. Go down as far as you can with that. Keep your legs straight, keep your lower back flat. So it really forces you to work your T-spine rotation. Straighten your knees. Think about twisting your upper back because your shoulders are super mobile, so they want to instantly compensate. So think about keeping your shoulders a little bit more locked in place and then rotating through. Try this with the kettlebell because as soon as you add the weight, it'll show you what breaks down first. Go into one of the last stretches and then I want to get into handstands.
After all that?
We're just getting you prepped for handstands here. Take it down to kneeling. Now again, for most of your clients who are immobile, taking your knees out to hip width helps dramatically with this stretch. You're basically gonna go down into your puppy dog pose, walking your hands out. Now the trick is to toggle back and forth and turn this into an isometric hold versus just a passive stretch. So you want your hips over your knees. For the first rep, you're gonna allow your ribs and your chest to open and arch through your back as much as possible to allow your chest to get to the ground. Pull your ribs in, and then that's really gonna target the upper back and the shoulders. For a lot of people, if they're hypermobile through the lower lumbar spine, they can just compensate, but as soon as you force them to tuck the ribs, that takes out the lower back and we're just targeting the shoulders now. Bring your knees in just a little bit closer because you're compensating too much. Yep, you're compensating too much through the hips. Bring your hips back over your knees, a little bit further back over your knees, and then now pull your ribs in. And then we're just stretching through the shoulders here. So you can toggle back and forth between allowing your ribs to open, arching as much as you can, allow your chest to drop to the ground, then pull your ribs in. Allow your back to arch here first. Let me see you can get your chest to the ground, arch as much as you can, and then pull your ribs in, and then look at your hands. This is working that shoulder mobility as well for handstands. Bring your hips back a little bit over your knees, then allow the arch all the way down, pull your ribs in, a little bit more. Now, arms straight, target the shoulders here. Nice. Tight legs. Yeah.